Which disaster curse is the best? In this video, I'm going to compare the 4 disaster curse units and tell you which one of these is the best, and in turn, which ones you should spend your phantom medals on, as well as which ones you should avoid spending on. Obviously, I'm not discussing Red Jogo here. Not only is he not on global yet, but we're only just going to compare the 4 phantom medal SSRs. That is, of course, Blue Jogo, Red Hanami, Green Mahito, and Yellow Dagon. All 4 units, of course, are domain expansion units. Just like in my other comparison videos, we will be going in ascending order, starting with the worst and making our way up to the best of the 4. So, as I say, let's start with the weakest of the 4 disaster curse units. Worst of which is, of course, Yellow Dagon, unfortunately. Yes, I've put it in a tier format, but just like usual, it's just so you've got something to look at. So, Dagon out of these 4 is the weakest, which is ironic given the fact that he is the most recent unit, which is an absolute shame. I'll be completely honest with you, there isn't much to say. Out of the 4, he is just objectively the weakest. Now, why is that? The whole gimmick of his kit is that he is focused around, well, he is a damage dealer, right? And like all 4 of these units, because they are domain expansion based units, they have rather large ult gauges. 1,800, well, 1,900, close to 1,800, 1,800, almost 2,000. Dagons of which being the largest ultimate gauge, which means it takes the longest to get, despite the fact it is also objectively the weakest, right, out of all the domains. Why is Dagon specifically so weak? The main gimmick of Dagon specifically is that he feels like he has the most dated kit despite being the most recent. He chews through cursed energy like it is no one's business, so you have to have rare Yuki on the team, which is a given if you're running yellow anyway, but it does really neuter the kind of combinations you can use with him. But give him a bunch of cursed energy to try and do damage out of domain. His damage outside of domain is genuinely terrible. 200% terrible. 150 terrible. The buff he gets from his skill 2, while it does give you bits and pieces, overall it's not very good in my opinion. He just has a very confused kit. That's out of domain, right? Out of domain, his damage is pretty dog. Then you hit domain, which does last 6 turns, which is one of the longer domains, which is pretty good, but the domain itself doesn't do much. On top of that, inside the domain, his skills don't do much either, and as I say, he chews through cursed energy because your main goal with Dagon is to spam his skill 3 because it increases the damage he receives, the enemy receives, and it also gives damage over time, which is pretty decent, and it also has a chance to stop as well, which is pretty good. Well, it seems so on the surface, right? But all of his skills are AoEs, so it feels like you're missing out damage whenever you use these skills, even though they are his go-tos, and it's the same outside of domain, which is kind of annoying. 360 AoE, only a 10% damage increase isn't great. His DOT overall isn't great. Basically, the whole issue with Dagon as a unit as a whole is that his percentages are way too low, and as a result, his damage pre-domain and post-domain are terrible. If you use Degumi as a DPS, it will do more damage. Yellow Nanami solo DPS, more damage. Zonji, obviously. Junpei, SP, will probably do more damage than Dagon in his own domain, which is ridiculous. He genuinely needs SP buffs just to increase his percentages, because without them, he's just genuinely terrible. His skill 2 could be good, but he needs just a huge number increase for it to be good. And inside domain, I think he needs a significant increase to the debuffs as well as just the damage overall, because even when the domain launches, it doesn't do a bunch of damage, which isn't great. It's not like Jogo or Mahito where the domain itself does a decent chunk of damage. No, the damage here is still not good, and the debuffs provided by the domain aren't great either. Damage received and stacks of DOT. Since Dagon's stats overall aren't the highest, the DOT itself isn't great either. His auto skill is okay, but yet again, it's not great. His auto skill is something you'll kind of forget about. It's just mild buffs, it's nothing crazy. But to be honest, there isn't much to say about Dagon. He is, unfortunately, he's my personal favourite disaster curse, like in the actual verse, but he is objectively the worst here. There is nothing strong about him. His skill 1s are bad, his skill 2s are bad, his skill 3s have potential, but they're just bad. Like, for example, outside of domain, this being forced to be, he doesn't have like a dedicated solo attack, which makes sense because like you look at the Dagon fight inside his own domain and he's attacking 3 people at once, so it makes sense that most of his kit would be centered around doing damage to multiple units at once, right? But at the same time, that view has significantly neutered how his skills work, because I think since it's an AoE, the developers have reduced the damage that it would do, and as a result, it's just not good. He just needs a massive increase to his stats. Like, there's nothing else to say about the unit. Any other unit as a yellow DPS will do more damage. And don't forget, that's his role. He was created with the purpose of being a DPS, and he's just not very good at it. And he's, unfortunately, as I say, significantly underwhelming, so I wouldn't suggest summoning for him. Well, not summoning for him. I wouldn't suggest exchanging for him with Phantom Medals. Just get literally anyone else, okay? Like, genuinely, the other three have their own uses. Some more niche than others, but Dagon, there's not actually, like, a good use for him, which is a shame, because he is the most recent, which is the most confusing thing about him. He is the most recent unit, yet despite the fact he has the most dated and underwhelming kit, which is such a shame, because ironically enough, he came out in relative close proximity to good yellow units, like Yellow Toji, Yellow Kusakabe's just came out, and he's apparently really cracked. Like, a couple yellow units came out around him, and it doesn't matter, he is just still a significantly dated and just bad unit overall. I mean, to be honest, outside of Jogo, because he already has them, I think all of these units could do with SP buffs, but since Dagon is the weakest, despite being the most recent, I think he deserves them the most. Yes, there is bias there, because as I said, he's my favourite, but Dagon needs significant changes for him to be viable for anything, because the numbers are just way too low. Well, that's enough to be said about Dagon. He's not very good. Who's next, right? Maybe there is some debate about this, maybe there isn't, but personally I'd say Hanami is third. Now, does that mean Hanami is, a bad unit? No, I think Hanami, like, overall, these units are not terrible, in my opinion. I think all four, barring Dagon, unfortunately, are pretty good. They have niche uses. Now, the main gimmick with Hanami specifically is that Hanami is a debuffer, right? Now, out of all the debuffers in the game, traditionally they will just increase the amount of damage you do, more like a support than anything. Hanami, however, is, if you look on the tier list for the wiki, they are classed as a specialist, because Hanami's main gimmick is decreasing the damage that the opponent does, which is pretty cool, because if I remember correctly, it is a 35% decrease, like 33, and increases ult gauge rate by almost double for 3 turns, and that stacks. So Hanami can get their ult super fast, which is really good. Like, just for comparison's sake, look at the skill 2. 30% for 3 turns, 86. And Hanami came out immediately. I think Mahito came out, Jogo and Hanami came out immediately, then Mahito came out a couple months later, and then Dagon recently. But just look at the difference, 86% is massive. Like, you will get ult so quickly with Hanami, and look at that, 33%, and it stacks, so 66% like each turn, bare minimum, is ridiculous, right? And on top of that, domain. Now, I will say this about Hanami, despite the, the animation being like this big laser beam, like a Kamehameha Senko looking thing, the damage is really bad. You are not using Hanami for damage at all. Like, you will never use Hanami as a DPS. It's not like Teen Nanami where, like, yeah, they are support, but they'll also be pulling out numbers. Hanami, no. Hanami is not doing any significant damage. Look at them like Rare Yuki or Inumaki, just a tiny bit more, but like, they're not there for damage, right? But like, decreases damage further. That's all the effect is inside the domain. 33% decrease on top of that as well. Like, there was a reason back in the day, right? I say back in the day, like a year ago, right? If that. The main gimmick team you would use would be Rare Yuki, Rare Inumaki, Hanami, and Mahito. And we'll get into Mahito later. But the reason you would use Hanami alongside Yuki and Inumaki was because the guarantee for Cursed Energy allows you to spam Hanami's skill 3, which decreases damage and guarantees you get an ult really quickly. And Inumaki allows you to get an ult even quicker within 2 to 3 turns. So you debuff the enemy ridiculously, and then you pop domain to debuff them even further. And this buff you can still do inside domain. So, like, the enemies consistently will be doing 0 damage to damage type advantage. Like, the enemy should be doing thousands, but they'll literally do 0 because they'll be in domain, which takes off a third, and they'll, lose from the skill 3, they'll lose 2/3 of damage. So they're literally doing 0% damage, right? It's ridiculously cracked from that perspective. However, the main issue with Hanami is that this is 40. I think this is, what you call it, this is outdated, because I'm pretty sure it's 35 Cursed Energy now. I just don't think they've updated Hanami since, Hanami's kind of a forgotten unit, to be honest. I'm pretty sure it's 35 Cursed Energy, but even still, 35 Cursed Energy a turn is a lot. However, to counteract that, Hanami does get, I think, more Cursed Energy per turn. you use the buff and then you'll get an extra 10 cursed energy, recovers 20. Like, that's good. You get extra cursed energy when you're low, which means you can use the debuff again, which means if you use the debuff, you can use ult again. It just feeds into Hanami's kit really well. The only downside of all of these units, specifically with Red though, which can be kind of annoying, but it's not so bad on Hanami than it is on Mahito, but I'll get to that later. Hanami will regen a bunch of HP every turn, which means Hanami has really good survival. So not on top of the debuffing and all that, the debuffing can be consistent because it's rare that Hanami will die. Yes, Hanami has like lower HP on the end of things, like overall I'm pretty sure. I just think Hanami's page just hasn't been updated in a while, so I think some of these stats are wrong. But overall, Hanami has decent survival because, as I say, 13% each turn, damage reduction like received on top of the skill 3 is ridiculous, on top of domain. Like, Hanami has very good uses. It's just Red overall as a category doesn't need it. The only reason Hanami isn't used more is because Hanami isn't a needed unit. Hanami can be used, but Domain Gojo, like Toji, Teen Nanami, Yaga, Inumaki, there's like so many other cracked red units that do either tank or reduce damage or just buff damage more than you like, so you can get the stage done quicker, that Hanami's kind of fell out. And on top of that fact, there are more and more bosses that come out these days that are debuff resistant, and if they're debuff resistant, Hanami is literally like dead weight. You could literally use any unit and get more worth, but Hanami does literally 0 damage, so it's pointless to have them. Overall, Hanami is a solid unit, has good survivability, increases the team survivability with their debuffs. Their ult is pretty strong. It doesn't do a lot of damage. It's deceptive with its animation because it looks really powerful. It's not. And it is, if you didn't know, this is the only time we actually see Hanami's domain ever, because in the series, you know, Hanami eats a hollow purple instead of using their domain. But it is cool to see it in the game, right? This is the only actual time we get to see it. Obviously, you know who's next. Let's get into number 2, and that's obviously Mahito. Now, as I mentioned the reason I bring up Mahito when I was discussing Hanami, because as I said, the old school team for like the first 40 floors was Yuki, Inumaki, Mahito, Hanami. Because, okay, so you've used Hanami a bunch, and you've used Yuki, and you've used Inumaki, so everyone has cursed energy to spam, everyone has ult gauge, and what you would do is, the most important thing about Mahito as a unit is his ultimate is rather unique. So he does percentage-based damage, which is exclusive to Mahito as far as I'm aware, you know, since he damages the soul and stuff, which is a pretty unique way to explore that in the game. But, you know, increases the damage received, which is pretty much the effect of the domain, and sometimes you can insta-kill enemies, but that won't happen with bosses, right? The reason you would use this on Hanami was because you would keep debuffing the enemy with Hanami's domain and skill 3, then you would use this to decrease the enemy by 15%, and then you would just go for about 40 turns and just chew through their health slowly, because you are not only are you reducing the enemy's damage with Hanami, you are also increasing your defense with Inumaki's skill 2, which is also giving you ult gauge, which means you can spam the domains more. And on top of that, if you use Mahito's domain and then you overwrite it with Hanami, that means Mahito doesn't go into burnout as quickly. You don't have to sit and wait for the domain to be finished. Hanami just overwrites it, and as that's overwritten, you only have like 1 turn of burnout to then start getting ult gauge again. And the reason this is more potent as well than Hanami is because of this skill 2 as well. It pretty much makes you invulnerable. It's the same as like, it gives you dodge for the turn, pretty much, okay? And it also gives you a bunch of ult gauge, which is ridiculous. So you're using Rare Inumaki with like the Jogo, Nanami and Yuji memory that I forget the name of, and you're using this skill 2, like you get ult with Hanami and Mahito super quick. And even if you're using Mahito on his own, you're using this skill 2 can get you ult gauge really quick, which is really strong. The rest of his kit is fine. The rest of his kit is the outdated part. Like, his skill 2 and his ult is unique and works really strongly and is really good, but his skill 1 and skill 3 are pretty outdated. We'll go into the pre-domain versions first, right? So his skill 1 is really cool. It's just, you know, since, you know, Mahito can transfigure his own body to fit whatever, he always does like type advantage attack with his skill 1, which is really good. But, you know, of course, since it's a skill 1, that doesn't really matter because it's not going to do a bunch of damage. It just means it's not going to be type disadvantage, which is pretty neat. And his skill 3, you know, depending on your Jujutsu and enemies, this is like just for, you know, fodder missions to get through quickly. You're very rarely going to be able to insta-kill enemies. It doesn't work on bosses. It doesn't work on floors. You're not going to insta-kill anything. Anything that can be insta-killed isn't really, you know, worth playing the game for. Just run it on auto, okay? But inside domain, all his skills change, right? Completely. The skill 1 is the same. Basically, his skill 2 in domain gives a taijutsu debuff, which is pretty decent. Use them alongside Green Yuji if you really want to. I would suggest it, but whatever. Sure, a little bit of taijutsu, can't hurt. Skill 3, just more jujutsu damage and has a chance to... Like, these aren't terrible in of themselves, but as I say, the main gimmick of Mahito is you just want this to be used and reused as much as possible, right? Which is pretty cool. Now his auto skill gives himself a bit of HP. The only downside is that you need a bunch of cursed energy for this to proc sometimes, and since you're spamming his skill 2, you won't always have cursed energy. Like, you'll be spamming this version of his skill 2, which is 20, so it's pretty costly, so you can get ult and then, you know, etc, etc. So sometimes you just won't get regen a bunch of the time, but it's still something that's nice. But the only downside is, as I said before, as I was going to get into it before, is that all these 4 units cannot heal with RCT. For Hanami, that's not a big deal because they get guaranteed heals, which is great, but Mahito is less consistent because he needs more cursed energy. And on top of that fact, green, if you're running green and you're anywhere close to optimal, you're running green Teen Shoko, right? Because she's a beast and she can't heal Mahito. He's a curse. It doesn't work. It's the same with Red and Yuta and Hanami, but since that's more of a passive thing, like that's just a side thing that Yuta does as well as being an attacker, it's not as big of a deal. But since that's Shoko's only thing, it means she is just missing out on healing like a bunch of like damage with Mahito because he can't be healed from it, which is a little bit annoying. Overall, he is an outdated unit because of how the meta of the game was forced to change because of the gimmick team. Like, I personally think because of the meta of, you know, Hanami, Mahito, and Yuki and Inumaki, they kind of had to change how the floors work and push the meta towards mono-type teams. So you can't run this team anymore, right? It just doesn't work, unfortunately, because Yuki and Inumaki will just take too much damage too quickly and you won't even get a chance to get started, which is unfortunate. But still, it was a fun gimmick team while it lasted. But even outside of that, like, Mahito's damage isn't terrible. You can still use him as a DPS. One good way to use him is on specific floors where you're using green. Nuke with Hollow Purple Adult Gojo, and any damage that's left to be done, you can finish off with percentage from Mahito. Like, say you do a huge nuke with Hollow Purple and it doesn't kill, that means Mahito can step in and do like the final 15% with his ult, which is really good. But of course, let's get into the big boy himself. He's number 1. Of course he is. If this was pre-SP, Jogo would be at the bottom. He'd be next to Dagon, right? Pre-SP, Jogo is pretty buns, I'm gonna be real. But the SP system made him a monster. To put it one way, people say if you don't have Sukuna, use Jogo. Think about that. Like, if you don't have Sukuna, use Jogo. Now, legitimately think about that. How cracked does a unit have to be for people to say use him if you don't have Sukuna, right? Like, he is a really fun and really good unit. Obviously, post SP. The fact that he does good DOT damage, right? Like, pretty good DOT damage. I think it does always cap, like, the amount of burns you can do caps at 3, which was unfortunate, but overall, pretty good. His ult does deceptively decent damage. Great alliteration. Reduces damage received, increases damage dealt, increases crit rate, gives him a bunch of cursed energy. Even if it would max out your cursed energy, it'll put you way above the cap. Increases his Jujutsu stat. He also has just a built-in chance to evade, which increases his survivability a bunch. The only annoying thing about Jogo, in my opinion, is that one of his passives is this, and it's really annoying because you want him to be low HP, so you do that a little bit more damage with a nuke, and it is unfortunate, but it works well with his memory, the Pride memory, because it wants the same gimmick. They were clearly made to be together, but it is kind of annoying. But overall, so his skill 1 does DOT, skill 2 does DOT, skill 3 just does good damage, right? And on top of that, his skill 1 and skill 2 are buffed, depending on how much cursed energy you have. And don't forget, I said earlier, when you pop domain, you get 80 cursed energy and an extra 10 cursed energy as well. Think about that. That's dope. He is swimming in cursed energy and it buffs the stats when he uses it. So you can use his skill 2 to get great DOT and good damage full stop, which is fantastic. And then after you've got a bunch of DOT, use his skill 3 inside his ult, because don't forget, crit rate is 200% with his skill 3. Do a brick of damage. It does not look like much. It doesn't. 3 times to a random enemy. But if you're against a single enemy, it'll only hit that person, so it's 690 damage, so 700% damage really overall to one single enemy, and his Jujutsu stat's pretty decent. He does have low HP, he is a glass cannon just like in the main series, but overall there isn't like really a main downside to Jogo besides, you know, the ult itself doesn't do ton of damage. It's just he's similar to someone like Zonji or something like that, where, or like Sukuna, you do the ultimate, that does a decent amount of damage, but then you also have a bunch more damage after that to do, right? You have you can spam his skill 2, his skill 3, you will, like, he does do a chunk of damage followed by another chunk, right? It's not like one huge big ult, which is great, right? He's just a great damage dealer, right? When you compare him to Dagon, it's night and day. It's ridiculous, right? It's genuinely, I cannot fathom how ridiculously different these units are. Like, all of these units have very different kits towards each other, but these are the only two that are like attackers that have some, they both do DOT inside their domain, except Dagon's is just worse, and Jogo can apply his outside of domain, I'm pretty sure. His skill 1 will just inflict domain, inflict DOT, which is good. Same with the skill 2. Like, you don't have to be inside domain to apply DOT, which is great. With Dagon to do Death Swarm, you need to be in domain, which is annoying, but it makes sense. But there's really not much to say about Jogo. You just want to give him a memory that increases the Jujutsu damage he does. Obviously, non-standard is the go-to, because of course it is. But he's just great. There's like not really, as I say, the only real downside is his HP is overall pretty low, even after the SP system. The only annoying thing, one thing that does genuinely annoy me about it's also Phantom Parade in general, because they went towards the route of non-mono teams are always going to be weaker overall, except if you had like Domain Jogo, of course, but he's just Domain Gojo, but he's like the exception, right? You can't have a disaster curse team, which it feels like such a shame to me. I know that's incredibly stupid, especially if you just force all 4 of these units on a team. It would do terrible because they'd just constantly overwrite their own domains, and it would not work at all. Even if you discount the fact that, all of them are of different typings, so they die really quickly. Even if they were all the same typing, their kits they were not made for each other, right? Which is such a shame because, we don't really have enough bad guys in the game, which is a very stupid thing to complain about, but give me a Grasshopper Curse, give me Harutech, give me anything. I just want more bad guys, right? Maybe that's just me. It's annoying, but whatever. Overall, I like all of these units. I think all of them have fun bits and pieces to their kit. Dagon's, despite having cool animations and Dagon being my favorite disaster curse, he's just terrible. There's no ups and downs about it. He's just bad. His numbers are way too low and his kit is very confused. If they put him in the SP system, his skill 2 needs to be buffed significantly. Like, I'm talking, make his skill 2 like Blue Gojo skill 2 and give him 100% damage buff, because then he'll finally do a tiny decent shred of damage, but without something ridiculous like that, he will always be terrible. He needs mega buffs. Hanami is a niche but still useful unit. Chews through cursed energy like an angry dog, but despite that fact, the domain and skill 3 in of itself gives a bunch of cursed energy. Doesn't give cursed energy, it gives a huge amount of ult gauge charge rate, which is very useful. Mahito, think about this, he makes himself invincible and gives him ult gauge, so even if he's the last person on the team, if you have enough CE to spam his skill 2, you can spam his skill 2 until you pop domain to do 15% of damage, 15% of a boss's HP guaranteed, which is insane. Back in the day, there might have been flaws and stuff. I remember flaws and stuff where you have Mahito's an off DPS in the back, then he's the last character alive, you spam his skill 2, you pop domain, and then you manage to get through by the skin of your teeth, just because of how his percentage based damage works and how unique it is, which is really useful, really unique and really cool. I wish they experimented more with him. I hope they buff him significantly, just increase the rest of his stats, make his skill 3 just do more Jujutsu damage because it's rarely going to insta-kill stuff, whatever. Overall, unit's really cool and really fun, just buff him. I could say that for Hanami, Dagon and Mahito, just buff him. But Jogo, he's just good. There's a reason, right? There is a reason that he's a lot of people's favourite disaster curse. He's not mine, as I said, I'm Dagon, but he's really fun and really cool. His DOT, really strong. It's not as good as Sukuna's, obviously, because I don't think it stacks as high. I think it only goes up to stacks of 3 or slightly higher, whilst, Sukuna can get 10. It's night and day, but even still, when people say he's like Sukuna light is the best way to describe Jogo, and he's free to play, and the SP system improved his auto skills and his domain, he's just so much better, right? He got buffed through updates and through the SP system, like Geto, right? It's he's very similar in essence to Geto. He came he was on the starting roster, or close to, because Geto came a month or 2 after the game opened, or at least on global, and then he's an okay unit, but then he kind of fades into the background. But then the devs just give him a huge buff without the SP system, and then on top of that, Jogo got buffed through the SP system as well, which has made him an absolute monster, and I feel like most people would agree. Hold up, where do they put him on the tier list? Now we gotta find this out. So I imagine he's up pretty decently high. Like, look at that. He's a free-to-play unit, and he's, like, above SP Nobara, Green Yuji, Hollow Purple Gojo, Blue Gojo. As I've said before, you know, the tier lists and on the wiki isn't the best place, but as I've said also many a time, that is a good way to see how a lot of fans of the game kind of place things colloquially. Good little insight to see how a lot of people view these units. And Jogo is viewed very highly, and it's for good reason. Jogo is undoubtedly the best of the four. But I have very high hopes for these three, and I really hope they all get buffed. But, well, they are going to get buffed, trust me. Dagon, in a year's time, he'll be top 1 unit, trust me. Trust me, dude. I'm a believer. I'm a Dagon believer. But that being said, choose my dudes. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.